Recording about now. All right. Hello. Today is a special day with a special interview. We have someone who I would call the most progressive representative, perhaps the most progressive politician in general in the state of Florida, Anna Eskamani. Do you agree with that characterization?
Well, I definitely do my best to have a people-centered approach to everything that I do, and I'm probably one of the officials who is the most critical of corporations as well. And so, yeah, I think it depends on how folks define all the different political terms around us, but I definitely am someone who tries to practice people over everything else.
I think the first time I heard who you were was I have a friend in UCF, and
Nice.
yeah, and then she was saying she's also Iranian, and she was saying like, oh, there's this really cool Iranian um uh, uh member of the house, and she's progressive and all that stuff. And then I saw more. I saw you were endorsed by Bernie in 2018. I was like, okay,
Right?
that's a good politician. Like that's the best indicator, I think.
He's like the OG for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. That's
yeah. So
awesome.
I guess well, I'm Nathan. I'm not too famous or anything. This is just gonna go to YouTube. I ran for city council. I didn't win, but for a first time run, I got 41% of the vote against a 24-year incumbent Republican. Um,
Wow.
so I think I did a pretty good job, and it seems like every meeting since he's been having a meltdown each time. He told the mayor to go back to the military. So it seems like I left an impression on the guy. He's not going through a good time.
Wow.
But
That's
uh,
wild.
this is more of an interview for you. I just wanted to give that introduction. Um, the way this interview was started, just so people know, is I was on Instagram Live because Anna goes live all the time on Instagram and Facebook, and she's really easy to communicate with. She said, email me. I emailed, boom, it happened.
And here
Uh,
we are.
yeah. So I'm honored, but I guess going into my questions, my first question is, what got you to this point? What's your story? What got you into progressive politics and then eventually led to the decision to run for state house?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's funny. I am not someone who grew up in a political environment. I mean, the personal is political, but you
Mhm.
don't know that to get older. But I grew up in a working class family as a daughter of immigrants. Both of my parents are from different parts of Iran, but met each other working at the same donut shop in Orlando. And they worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. My dad went to UCF and became electrical engineer on the weekdays and worked as a customer service representative at Walt Disney World on the weekends to make ends meet. And my mom worked at Kmart. That was her last job because in 2004, she passed away. And that was such a big loss for me and for my family that I still navigate to this day. But it also gave me such an important perspective that for so many of our families, no matter how hard you work, you can't make it. Like it definitely dismantles what is I think a stereotype that a lot of people have who are in power today around like pick yourself up from your bootstraps. And it's like, what if the bootstraps rip?
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's just the reality is that we're not setting up people for success. And
Yep.
instead we have a very exploitative system that creates so many barriers. In the case of my family, our credit card debt was so high because it was the only thing my parents could do to try to afford raising three kids in a very working class neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so as I got older, I just felt that the underdog needs warriors. And I got really involved with high school theater, not as someone on stage, but as a techie. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
love storytelling. I love the ability to build something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And during that time, had an amazing AP government teacher named Mr. Norris in my public high school that really brought to life for me just the importance of civic engagement.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry
was
about
plugged
that.
in. I was plugged in to presidential politics when I was even a 10-year-old. My fifth grade teacher gave us extra credit if we, you know, follow the election cycle. So I not only followed, but I was like printing out the polls every day, bringing them to class. Like I got really enthralled with the Gore Lieberman campaign, which is like
Yeah.
so random, looking back at it. But was a little disenchanted, honestly, after my mom passed away, and wasn't that politically engaged until Mr. Norris brought it back for me. So when I went to UCF myself, I started getting really involved with campus organizing, and so that's a long story, but I'll close with this point that my pathway into politics was not driven by political icons. It wasn't even driven by a political party. I was first registered NPA, and then I became a Democrat when I was at UCF, because I started seeing how involved the college Democrats were. And I found it really inspirational that these groups of students were helping their peers get plugged in, helping their peers get registered to vote. And I found that so inspirational that I decided to get involved. And then I registered Democrat later that year in 2010, and started getting involved with a lot of women's issues, got a job at Planned Parenthood where I was a patient first, and then ran for office as a first-time candidate back in 2018. So that's a very quick synopsis, but that's kind of how everything came to be.
Yeah. And I in your story, you mentioned like the thing in fifth grade about how you got really into the Gore Lieberman race. That reminded me in growing up for me, I was also somewhat like it, and when I would see it, it would interest me. The first election, I remember Obama versus Hillary, actually, that primary.
Wow,
That's how young
yeah.
I am. I was 7 at the time.
Wow.
And then it was first grade for me when it was the general. And I remember there was a in-class election, a mock election. And I remember I voted for Obama because, young Filipino, Hispanic male,
Totally.
immigrant household, leans towards the Democrats, of course. So I voted for Obama. And I remember this little girl comes up to me and she's like, "Who'd you vote for?" And I'm like, "Obama." And she just stares at me. She's like, "Why?" And so I'm like, "Oh my God." I'm like, Jesus.
Wow. Oh my God.
That's just a funny story I remembered. But yeah, my interest also continued going into 2012. And then throughout middle school, I had a really cool 7th grade civics teacher that I don't know what was going on with me. I was just getting more and more interested. And then in 9th grade, Bernie ran for me. And that was like the awakening in a way. And I've been tuned in since, But I will say, this leads me to my second question. And then I have a third question as well, just for further context. But my second question is, as someone who's in the state house, as someone who is a progressive, what would you recommend, partly to me, but also partly just broadly to all progressives that are involved in politics, that either have run or are currently planning future runs? What are your tips for them, and what would you like to see out of the progressive movement going forward?
Oh, such a great question. I think part of the collective success of any people-centered campaign is to be prepared. Because I think a lot of folks are excited to run for office, but they jump into it not necessarily having a clear scope of the expectation or what it takes.
Yeah.
I've seen some, especially younger kids in Florida with such great potential, make mistakes that really are preventable. There was one candidate several years ago that, unfortunately, like used his campaign funds to buy clothes and things like that. And that's just ethically, and I don't even know legally is allowed. And so, he ended up dropping out of the race. And that was such a bummer because he really was like kind of, creating such an exciting path for more young leaders. And so I think my first thought is you want to be prepared. I did not make the decision for office lightly. And I was 27, had 2 BAs, 2 masters, a job in nonprofits, was serving on multiple boards. Like I was very, I continue to be very, very engaged as a servant leader even before I ran for office. And so part of the exercise making this decision was, how much money do I need to raise and how much can I raise from my network?
Yeah.
And that was a very important question. And it wasn't just a rhetorical question. I built a list, I exported every contact off my phone into an Excel sheet, and I went through it and I saw, who are folks that can give me $5, who are some folks who might be able to give me a little bit more. And that was my first month of fundraising. I call it your love money list. It's a list of
Yeah.
people who love you and care about your success,
Mhm.
even if you're politically different or they're not politically engaged, they want to see you do good. And some of
Yeah.
my first donors and volunteers came from my college Democrat days, came from Planned Parenthood, came from my high school, all these different networks that I was able to be a part of. But I had a plan to outreach to them, and I was able to raise more than $50,000 my first month, and that
Mhm. Wow.
rose eyebrows, because at first people did not take me seriously, but once I reached $100,000 my first 2 months, and I wasn't taking any corporate money, then people were like, "Oh my god, who is this girl?" Right?
That's wild.
And so you have to have a plan to get you to a path of success. And I know it's frustrating that money continues to play a necessary role in our campaigns, but until we can get reform on finance in campaign finance laws,
Yeah.
we have to raise not as much as our opponents do. We have to raise some resources to communicate to a larger audience, because my first campaign was not easy. I had
Yeah.
$500,000 spent against me, 25 piece
Jeez.
negative mail, 3 negative TV commercials. It was ugly, but I had the resources to fight back. And knocking on doors was an essential part. So I also encourage folks to not only have a fundraising plan, but also have that field plan. And it's not just about going to as many events as possible. You got to bring government to people's doors. And
Exactly.
and I never stop. As soon as we win, we're back at the doors talking to people
Yeah.
about what we're doing in the legislature. So you also have to realize that in order for people to understand who you are and what you care about, you got to communicate that on your own. You can't let others co-opt your message and mislead people into the areas of what you care about.
Yeah, yeah. And the point you mentioned did inspire another question. So I'm gonna try to add it quickly in between this and the last question, because I know your time is short.
Sure.
Um, but with the legislature, and this is common in many states throughout the country. Um, but there is one party rule of the Republicans. What is it exactly that a Democratic representative can do to not make things that are exclusively bad come out of that legislator? What exactly can the minority do at this point?
Well, you have to be the loyal opposition, that's for
Yeah.
sure. And, you might not be able to win the votes in the chamber, but you can try to win the public perspective on that issue.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to communicate what's happening in legislature? You mentioned our weekly, Facebook and IG lives. I started those during the pandemic to help with constituent cases, and
Mhm.
a lot of those weekly check-ins are about constituent cases,
Yeah.
but we get a lot of policy questions too. And part of it is helping folks feel like they can tap in, they know what's happening in Tallahassee, and so they have a path to shift the direction of the state. So I think a part of it is the inside outside strategy. So you
Mhm.
do what you can to fight these issues on the House floor, in committee, ask the tough questions, but then you got to get that out to the public, using digital tools, uh, being thoughtful to earn media opportunities as well when it comes to crafting op-eds or doing press releases and things like that, because the Tallahassee press corps has also gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So you can't assume that reporters are just watching committee meetings. It's just not
Mhm.
happening anymore. So you have to be really intentional in using your bully pulpit to tell people what's happening in Tallahassee so they can join you in being concerned about the direction of our state. And it's tough because we are also expected to try to get things done. So I try to leverage my role as a state official to work on constituent cases to get results from whether it's DCF or Department of Economic Opportunity or small business relief. I try to leverage, healthcare issues. If you call our office for a state issue, we try to solve it. using our platform and our ability to contact state legislative agencies, and get, state executive agencies through the legislative staff to get results. So that's really important too, is just proving to people that when you elect the right folks, we will fight for you, even in environments that are difficult.
Mhm,
And I've been
mhm.
successful in passing, not just appropriation requests, things in the budget for my district, but also this past session, I was able to secure a 1-year tax break on children's diapers in Florida. And I
Mm.
was able to stop what would have been a multi-billion-dollar corporate tax break. And those
Mm.
are very like wonky subjects. And, it's all about tax policy, which not every person understands or follows, but those are areas that I have a lot of strengths in. And so you
Yeah.
lean on your strengths and you try
Yeah.
to have those policy wins as much as you can, even in an environment that might not be conducive to your political values.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Um, okay. So the final question I have, this was the first question I thought of. Uh, I remember seeing, I think, a story of you on one of your Instagram stories. You posted, I think it was a news article saying that one of the current representatives from the Orlando area in the U.S. House is not planning to seek re-election. I believe that that
Right.
candidate is one of the more conservative Democrats in the House,
Correct.
but they're leaving. So is that on your mind? And when exactly are they leaving? Because it's been a while since I saw the article. But
Yeah. I
I
mean,
gotta
they're
say, oh, sorry, my bad, my bad.
No, you're good. They're not running for election this cycle. And so, but a lot of folks wanted me to run for Congress, but unfortunately, due to the gerrymandered maps, that seat is just no longer a Democratic
Um,
seat.
mhm.
I kid you not, I went from a plus like 5 Dem to a plus Trump, like 12.
Wow.
And again, going back to like just being thoughtful to campaigning, it's like when
Yep.
seats are gerrymandered like that, you just, no matter how awesome you are, the numbers just don't exist,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's on purpose, right? But like I literally live in that district right now, and most of my district is that district, and then it expands.
Mhm.
But now I don't live in that district anymore. The new maps have totally drawn us into a different seat. And the seat that I'm in now is also an open seat and but it has a lot of Democrats already running.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was meant to be a African American seat. And I
Mhm.
respect that.
Yeah.
So that's why, that with many reasons is why I'm running for reelection, because I have a lot of good work to do in the Florida House. And
Yeah.
candidly, I'm getting my PhD right now and I really need to finish
Mhm.
it. I know I can't finish it if I'm running for another campaign.
Yeah.
So I will see what the world has in store for us, but I also feel really confident that we are doing good work where we are now. And I don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. With that additional context, that makes things a lot more clear to me. I didn't know about the gerrymandering going on in that district, but wow, plus
Right.
5 Dem to plus 12, you said? Plus 12 Trump?
Yeah, I mean, it's something like that. It's like super dramatic. And I
That's
think that's,
crazy.
Congressman Murphy also has 2 young children, but I'm sure there was concern that the seat would
Would be
dramatically
lost.
change. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it's just the product of our Republican majority, but also, Governor Ron DeSantis and how he operates. And at this point, none of our Republican colleagues are challenging him. Everyone is just bending over backwards to police him. And it's definitely unsettling. The
Isn't it
president,
amazing? Isn't it amazing how, like, in the Democratic Party, we don't even bat an eye at the fact people can say, oh yeah, yeah, Joe Manchin, Chris Zimmer, they're conservative Democrats. That's completely normal.
it's
When are we gonna have a progressive Republican, huh? You know.
I know it's not helpful to our success, candidly, because it's not like President Biden is a progressive president, right?
Yeah.
And yet, even what he's asking for is now controversial. And it's like, the Build Back Better plan. It's
Yep.
like, this is coming from the Biden administration, like he's not the progressive candidate that people voted for. So like on a spectrum, these are just basic issues of human dignity, right? To make
Yeah.
sure that you have the ability to raise your children, that you can spend time with your children, that your hard work actually yields economic stability,
Hmm.
right? And that you can have a roof over your head. Like none
Yeah.
of this is like super dramatic stuff, but and yet, it's become so controversial. And yeah, these Democrats have really hurt our ability to get anything done. And
Yeah.
it's all about self-preservation. The number of
Yeah.
times these people, are featured in like conservative media too. It's just like,
Yeah.
you're there for 6 years, like do something with
with
yourself,
with self-preservation, when I in my little like dipping my toe in the pool of politics in a way with me running, and I interact with a lot of political folks.
Right.
um I was like, I would say I was pretty direct with my point of view. Of course, I wasn't saying like, I wasn't screaming like, hey everybody, here's my ideology, because I don't think that's smart politics. But
Right.
I feel like there's a lot of people that sort of, I think Elon Omar or alluded to this on the Majority Report, mentioned something about some people go into politics real good with good intentions, but then
Right.
it 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 really sort of corrupts them. And for the longest time, I was like, how people have principles, people just easily abandon the principles. I'm like, no, it's about the career. It's about the career for a lot of people, and people really don't want to, people change. Now
Yeah.
hopefully, I never intend to change, unless it's changing for the better. But and I think
Right. Right.
mainly
Right. Right.
progressives have been the most consistent with their views. People like Bernie, same message the whole time.
Well,
But
and
we
and
yeah,
to that point, a lot of people have made the comment towards me of just like, please stay true to your values and so forth. And I appreciate the reminder, but um, you can't forget where you come from.
mhm,
And I'm proud to say that like my fundraising has even become like more small dollar since I got elected. In
yep,
most cases, once you get elected, a lot of candidates, they're less reliant on small dollar fundraising because they expand their ability to raise money from corporations and raise money from lobbyists. And we're the opposite. We
yeah,
actually have seen less $1,000 checks because we're just, our authentic selves, which actually doesn't always attract the larger donations, but can attract smaller gifts, right? But I am super blessed to have some incredibly generous donors in my district, actually, who just really care about the future of our state.
yeah,
And they've made contributions to my voter registration work that is incredibly generous.
yeah,
And so I'm very lucky to also have, on my side, some amazing, generous donors who don't represent a corporation, are not giving, for an alternative motive. They're giving because they really do care about the future of our state. And they know that you can't fake hard work. And they see me
absolutely.
doing the work and they want to help us continue to build that effort. So very proud of that too.
Yeah, well, I think you also got a pretty good team that you set up. Your campaign manager, I
100%.
realized,
100.
was my age, I think. So I was like,
Yeah, well,
wow.
we believe in building young leaders. And so every one of my managers have been first timers. It's
Yeah.
a lot of mentorship on my part,
Mhm.
but I think it's about building a bench, and we do not have a bench in Florida. And
Yep.
so we are trying to build that network of new young leaders. And in fact, at least 6 of our former interns are now legislative staffers in the Florida legislature. And so I take a lot of pride in our ability to, train that next gen of leaders too.
And speaking of inspiration, I know in Lake Worth, you know the Ronaldo. He
Yes,
won
so
his
proud of
race.
Ronaldo. Oh my
Uh
God, so
I
cool.
was curious, like how did you guys know each other? How
Well, I mean, first of all, just in like, political spaces, but I actually spent a day with Ronaldo as the water keeper of Lake
yeah.
Worth. And so he actually gave me a really great download of just what's happening with Lake Worth. And so I spent a day with him a few months ago and was just really impressed by him. So yeah, we both have a not just a love for water, but we both have a disdain towards the sugar industry. And so
Oh,
we
yep.
share our in our advocacy as well.
I gotta say, when every time I look deeper into the politics, and especially in Palm Beach,
Yeah.
the sugar industry is in almost every politician's pocket, but the best of the politicians are the ones without any connections. So that's why
Totally.
Ronaldo's really inspiring. Lake Worth is inspiring as a whole. They thought they elected a progressive majority back in 2021. They didn't quite, not yet, but then with Ronaldo getting the seat, they flipped it. It's now the only place in Florida, I think, as far as I know, with a real strong progressive majority. And it's very inspiring as someone that lives in the city just next to it, essentially. But I've kept you in for a while. I was told that you got a packed schedule, so I don't want to keep you too long. I guess
Yeah,
uh
I gotta run, unfortunately, but this was awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
yes, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording right